Welcome to another episode of Pound for Pound Box Report, episode 403. I am your host, Michael. Joining me this week, usual cast of characters. Uh, Gail from, is it still nyfights.com?
Yes,
Okay.
yes,
And
absolutely.
Daniel from For Boxing News, Indian Scriber. What's going on, lady and gent?
Yes. I will announce that I am the newest member of the Boxing Writers Association of America and the only woman member.
Oh,
Congratulations.
nice.
Congratulations.
Thank
Now I just
you,
need to
thank
see.
you. As if it will change a damn thing. It'll
Now I
still
need to
be the same
understand why
good,
the Boxing
everybody.
Writers Association has to be blocked, but that's another discussion for another
Oh,
day.
oh gosh.
I hadn't done anything to them. I don't know why, but it is what it is.
Hmm.
Um,
We'll have to have a chat about that. We'll
yeah. For those who are
figure
new
that
to
out.
for those who are new to Pound for Pound Box Report, Pound for Pound Box Report live, YouTube show, podcast, blogs, website, etc., discussing all things boxing. The motto is when boxing is good, we'll talk about it. When it's bad, we'll talk about it. My bottom line is, if it has anything to do with the sweet science, it will get discussed. If you want to find any and all information, the site is the place to go to. Um, p4pboxingreport.com. If you wish to email us any questions, thoughts, suggestions, etc., you can do so. P4pboxing at p4pboxingreport.com. On the site, if you navigate the site, you'll find links to where to catch the where you can find the YouTube channel, the Facebook, Tumblr, IG page, where you can find us all over the podcast realm, be it Anchor, be it Spotify, be it Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you listen to your favorite podcast, you should be able to find the Pound for Pound Box Report. If you wish to donate, dollar, $2, $5, whatever, um, we will be eternally grateful. Shout out to Jacob, who was on the show with us last week. He dropped a dono on Pound for Pound Boxing Report. Got Cash Me and PayPal donation links there. Last but certainly not least, if you are looking to get your body right, we're not too far from the summer. If you want to get your body right for that time period, please check out Beachbody, aka BODI now. Um, any and all programs, whatever fitness and your fitness goals are. If you're looking to lift weights, check out Lift 4 and the extension of Lift 4, Lift More. If you're looking for challenging, strenuous, um, hit cardio functioning workouts, I suggest you check out programs like 6 Weeks of the Work, Muscle Burns Fat. If you're looking to get your morning workouts on, please check out Morning Meltdown, a variety of programs, be it Fire Flow, be it Job 1, the P90X series 1, 2, and 3. They still work, particularly P90X 2 and 3. They're more updated than P90X, the original P90X, though that is still good. That is still good. Um, the Insanity Asylum series. If you're looking for a boxing specific workout, please check out 10 Rounds, 6 week programs. 6 week program, 3 days a week of boxing based cardio, 2 days a week of weightlifting. I've ran through it multiple times. I really like it. I'll probably do it once again this as we head into the summer. But yeah, please check out the links to BODI, aka Beachbody. And also, at the very least, please take advantage of the 2 week trial on BODI. And that is for 14 days, you get free access to any and all programs on Beach BODI. Excuse me. Let's get things going. Last week, went into a lot of detail about the return of Canelo Alvarez. Came back this past weekend in Guadalajara, Mexico, fought John Ryder, who I believe who was WBO interim champ, and the festivities there, the ring walk was spectacular. The fight, not so much, Gail. Canelo, he got the win, but he was pretty mid as far as I was concerned in his performance. Put Ryder down in the 5th round. I thought there was opportunities where he could have stopped Ryder, but give John Ryder credit. Tough as nails. Took shots and kept fighting. There was even one point where he was clearly wobbled, and yet he waved Canelo on, but in effect telling Alvarez to say, "Come on." was able to last the distance. Canelo wins by unanimous decision. The interesting thing in the aftermath, Ryder said that in his mind he thinks that Canelo is past his prime. That has sparked a lengthy discussion in the days after this fight. Your assessment of Canelo's performance, and do you agree? And Daniel, you can follow up too. Do you agree with Ryder saying that Canelo is not the fighter that he once was?
Let's start with the performance first. If any of you read our prediction, our mega prediction column in New York Fights, including many of our writers, in addition to some of our friends out there, Sergio Mora, Jamel Herring, among others, who weighed in, I said, bet the over, it's going to be a decision. And I was right. Canelo didn't need and didn't want to risk any injury and risk a bigger fight in September on this homecoming fight with Ryder. Honestly, you're right. The opening, the fanfare, the lights, the fireworks, the mariachis, that's what Canelo wanted to accomplish. And that was all done the minute his foot passed over the ropes and into the ring. That's what he wanted, to put that kind of a show on. Now, he just his mere presence after 12 years of not fighting in Mexico and longer not fighting at home, the fans were just happy to see him. I think he was aware of that. Once he knocked Ryder down, I'm sure he thought the end was near, but still going, Energizer Bunny. Ryder was determined to end that fight on his feet, and he did. Once he survived the worst of the knockdown and was soldiering on despite what was obviously a broken nose, Canelo eased off the gas. To stop Ryder was going to take more effort than he was willing to put out for a fight of this level. And again, the bigger risk for him wasn't the criticism that we're all talking about right now. It was injuring himself, having problems with his surgically repaired left hand, which he admitted he was nervous about in the early rounds until he got warmed up. He didn't want to take himself out of contention for whatever is coming up for him in September. So this fight wasn't unexpected to me. Now, the big question that everybody's talked about all week is Canelo past his prime? Yes, he is. He is only 32 years old, but he's had 60 fights. He has been fighting as a professional, since he was 15 years old. So you really have to set his age aside. He is absolutely the equivalent of a fighter who started their professional career at 19 or 20 or post-Olympics, and then start counting up those fights in those years, and you'd have a much older person. He just got an early start. It's not a devastating bit of truth to say that in a long, very accomplished career, you rise, you peak, and you slow down. And any of us much past 30 or 40, more for anybody out there, listen, we all know it. In the mind, you're as sharp as ever, but there's just those little things that kind of reveal the truth to you every day. And Canelo, even past his prime, we have to remember, is still a far superior boxer, fighter to the lion's share of his peers out there. So saying he's past his prime doesn't mean he's ready to retire tomorrow. It means he isn't going to be the overwhelming favorite again, except if he fights somebody along the lines of a John Ryder. The fights that we all want to see, number one, a fight against David Benavidez. Canelo will be the favorite, but he won't be an overwhelming favorite. Now, he is apparently hell-bent on a rematch with Dimitri Bivol. He should not even consider that fight because he's going to lose again. And that would do more damage to his career than, a competitive close loss, say, to a younger, stronger guy like David Benavidez. And frankly, is not a particularly exciting fight for the fans. As much as I admire and respect Dmitry Bivol, this isn't Salido Vargas. This isn't Bradley Provodnikov, folks. That's not the kind of fight it's going to be. So, this is a very rational, reasonable conversation, but it's not a damning thing to just simply note that Canelo's got a lot of wear on the tires. He's had a lot of fights, a lot of rounds, some of them very difficult. And the very peak physical performance days are probably in the rearview mirror. Now, a lot of fighters do overcompensate for that with their experience, their ring IQ, knowing themselves after all those years. So it doesn't mean that there aren't still some great fights left for Canelo Alvarez.
Canelo has definitely turned. He's not the young cub anymore. He's definitely an old lion at this stage of his career. Daniel, to Gail's point, he seems to be hell bent on wanting the rematch with Bivol and winning that rematch at 175. When the two fought last year, May, well, basically a year ago, this month, right?
Mm-hmm.
Bivol won, and he won in a fashion that was wider than the scorecards, right? I said at that time, if they were to fight again, I feel strongly that Bivol would beat him again. Be it at 68, 75, or 68, is it wise at this point for Canelo to seek this rematch with the light heavyweight champion, Dmitry Bivol?
Looking at this performance, the answer should be no. It's a fool's errand to do it at this stage because to look at how the fight went in, Canelo's always been a slow starter when it came to his fights. It showed him this in this fight with John Ryder. He was able to get the knockdown in the third round with combinations, but we also have to remember something that he hasn't been used to in a good while. He's been used to finding places like Las Vegas, and which is not high, to my understanding, is not as high in altitude as Guadalajara is. And if you're not born in that type of environment, it takes a lot. Or if you've been a long time away from it, I speak from personal experience, it takes a while to get used to again. Especially when you're doing an activity that's as strenuous as boxing. Now, as far as how Canelo looked overall, you could tell how tentative he was with that left hand, and that's completely understandable. You just had surgery on it. You don't want to injure it. You're already seeing up the horizon to what next, and he won fairly decisively. The problem is going to be, unfortunately, is unless he develops a very, very radically different game plan than what he did the first fight against Bivol, you're not going to get a different result. Especially when you're demanding the fight to be at 175. Canelo is already small. It's already kind of small already from 168. We saw how small he was at 175, both against Kovalev and Bivol. So it seems a bit foolhardy, but I understand the pride aspect of it. He does feel that he could probably change something to make Bivol come out a little bit more, because Bivol, unfortunately, he still has that tendency that if he already knows he's won the fight by the third round, he's not going to push the gas a little bit. He did put a little bit in the fight with Canelo because he understood the stakes, but unfortunately, that's a tough mentality to break at times. I like I said, I would heavily advise fighting somebody else. But the problem, unfortunately, is that in the political area that he's aligned himself in, a lot of the opponents that we would love to see him with, they're not going to deal with. When it comes to Benavidez, until I hear that statement emphatically that he's rescinding the statement that he made prior that he's never fighting another Mexican for a belt, Benavidez is off the table immediately. Unfortunately, the other two major ones, which would be Jamal Charlo, who called them out again, and Demetrius Andrade, they're both without Heyman. And unfortunately, Canelo is on friendly terms with Mr. Eddie Hearn, and we know there's probably one promoter that likes to deal without Heyman less than Bob Arum, it's Eddie Hearn. So though it doesn't leave a lot of options unless you're going to gun for the big fish and get that rematch with Bivol. The part that's going to be interesting is that he's saying he wants the exact same terms as the first fight. The terms that he got in the first fight was when you were the clear A side, man. In the rematch, Bivol's already made it known he's the A side. It's going to be his terms. And his terms are 168. So that's going to be an interesting window because there's a real possibility he's, as much as he may want the rematch, he may not get the rematch. And unfortunately, the options that are available may not be the most satisfactory from a political standpoint.
It's going to be interesting to see where Canelo goes. Shout out to everyone in the chat, YouTube chat, Los Libertinos podcast, Joshua Cabrera, Mr. B, I'll call you that. We haven't, in terms of your question, we haven't talked about that, and we will not talk about that this particular episode. He's asking about Haney and Loma. We talked about it when the fight was announced. We'll do a deep dive into that fight next week, but appreciate your question still. In terms of Canelo, it's interesting to see where he goes. If he's adamant on fighting Bivol, more than likely the fight will happen. If he's adamant that he wants it at 75, no matter how much Bivol protests and claims he wants to move, he wants to rematch at 168. Let's face it, Canelo is still the money man in the sport. He still has a lot of pull, and he could sway, cajole Bivol, throw enough money at the table his way that rematch will happen at 175. Will Canelo win, in my opinion? I stand on my square. I said what I said immediately after the fight. No, but if he wants it, that's likely the fight is going to happen. If for some reason it doesn't happen, I say Benavidez, but I don't think at this point that Canelo wants any part of Benavidez. He hadn't, in all of these months, put it this way, in the period from Benavidez's win over Caleb Plant, you and I, we all know that there's been a flood of comments, and there's been a flood of comments calling for a fight with Benavidez and Alvarez, right? But you've never heard Canelo definitively say, I want to fight Benavidez. When the question has been posed to him, he's talked around Benavidez, and at certain points, to me, it seemed like he's tried to move the goalpost when it comes to a potential fight with Benavidez. So I don't think that's going to happen. But Canelo, Bivol, that is going to be okay. Let's tangle with this, Mr. Yemi. Canelo said he fight anyone. Yeah, that wasn't a general question about that wasn't a question about Benavidez. But when have you heard him say that? Yeah, I will fight. I will fight Benavidez. You haven't. He hasn't said it. He has not said it. That's the reality. And to Daniel's point, we all have to be convinced here. Okay, how can I put this without? Because I don't want to be rude. Show me some
Don't hold
receipts.
your back. Don't hold back.
Show me some receipts, sir, where you have Canelo out here saying that yes, Benavidez, yeah, let's go. You haven't. You haven't. And until I'm with Daniel with this one. Until I hear Canelo says definitively, yeah, we will fight Benavidez, not just we'll fight Bivol, and then after that we will see. That's what he said during the lead up to the fight against Ryder. Until I get that, no, I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced one bit. Anybody wants to respond to Yemi's question?
Well, it's a tricky thing because what Canelo has said is, I will fight anybody. That's a generic answer a lot of boxers give. It's a placeholder answer, fair enough.
Something he looked at into the future. Excuse me. Yeah. That's not definitive enough. That's a general remark, respectfully.
Yeah, and Yemi is right there. He did say, well, after Bivol, he'd consider it. Honestly, I don't think it is an impossibility for him to end up fighting somebody like Charlo. Those deals can be made. Tank and Ryan proved they can be made. So these other guys and the promoters, who were involved, when they then backpedal and say, well, it's kind of tough. Well, I'm not sure. Well, you did it. Tank and Ryan proved where there's a will, there's a way. If you really want to make it happen, you can make it happen. And I do think that a changing of the guard type of fight at 168 with Canelo and Charlo is a worthy fight. I'd like to see that. I admit I'm a little more interested in seeing somebody like Benavidez, but I am very skeptical about whether that happens. And asking Canelo to continue fighting high-level fights, in his mind, he may be close to being done. It wouldn't surprise me because really, we're talking about a few handful of options for him, but beyond that, what is left for him to do? And I have said this before, and people thought I was joking around, and the more time passes, the more it seems to be serious that he wants to pursue a professional golfing career. He is very good. As little as he applies himself, that's entirely possible. So if he's going to do that, the truth is he needs to get on it. He's made generational wealth. He's the 5th highest paid athlete in the world, according to Forbes magazine, the only boxer in the top 10. And he may just simply be losing the hunger and the motivation. And that really is important. There you go, Los Libertinos. Absolutely. Put that fight in Texas. We know Canelo has already put 70,000 people in the seats for a fight in Texas against Billy Joe Saunders. Imagine it being against one of their native sons in Charlo. Now that is a money-making fight. Let me tell you, Canelo and Bivol is not a money-making fight. And that's important at this point because of the demands both these guys would make. Promoters would have a very, very difficult time justifying the cost. And if you thought the undercard in Mexico was lacking, it's because there wasn't a whole lot of money left over, even though Canelo, in theory, took a pay cut to do that fight. But Bivol and Canelo are both going to want serious money to fight in Las Vegas, and there will be zero money left for an undercard. So I think that is a doubtful fight. I'm not saying it won't happen, couldn't happen, but there are a lot of obstacles in the way. Yeah, Los Libertinos, the more I think about what you just pointed out, the more I like that. Big money fight in Texas it would be very well received, and you put a big crowd in the stands. Those sort of milestones, those external milestones, do seem to motivate Canelo. I think his internal motivation, is starting to wear out a little bit. And maybe that's really the key element when we're asking the question, is Canelo past his prime?
I'll go to you, Daniel, because the initial comments, and I'll put them right back up again. There was in response to what you were saying about Canelo and Benavidez, so I'll give you the opportunity to respond.
Yeah. With Gail, like as I mentioned, that is the standard fighter response that you're going to get. But the problem, unfortunately, is who you align yourself with when it comes to promoter. Canelo technically does have his own promotion, but we know he pretty much acts like a mercenary, going from promotion to promotion ever since he left Golden Boy. He's worked with other fighters, he's worked with promoters before, but the one he's been most friendly with has been Eddie Hearn. And unfortunately, like I said, Eddie Hearn and Al Heyman, like I said, there's any two people that get along less than Al Heyman and Bob Arum, it's Eddie Hearn and Al Heyman. We have to remember there's a reason why we have yet to see, even at this stage, we think it's pie in the sky. We have never seen Joshua versus Wilder when both men had belts. When the money was right there. There's a reason for that. So that's going to be the problem that you're going to be facing because, like I mentioned with Benavidez, until I hear that statement from Canelo, that he says, I will fight another Mexican for a world title.
Right.
I consider Benavidez automatically off the table. Hell, if Zurdo would have beaten Bivol, I would have considered Zurdo off the table. That's how much that statement has meant. And Charlo's going to be an interesting situation because the three of us know that his situation with Al is a little bit fluid.
Right.
So there is a possibility with Charlo, but Charlo does get lined with Al more times than not. Andrade has been the one. If there's probably one fighter that he will not fight out of spite, it would probably be Andrade. Just because of the way he came up to him in that press conference. If people remember, Andrade tried to get that fight, and Canelo yelled him out, "You just want a payday. Get the fuck out of here. I'll never fight you."
That's so petty on his part.
Yeah, but he will do it out of spite. But the problem is when it comes to skill set, when it comes to size, and when it comes to styles clash, those are his three best opponents in 168. Because unfortunately, on the side of Top Rank, on the side of Matchroom, on 168 is pretty bare bones. Do you honestly want to see? I saw this on Twitter, and I had to respond to it. I saw it on Twitter because people were already discussing it. The possibility of him and Edgar Berlanga, and he doesn't get Biffle. You know how piss poor that fight would be if you have Canelo versus Edgar Berlanga. The only thing that's appealing to that is Mexico versus Puerto Rico. That's it.
It's not even appealing in that perspective. They ain't stupid.
But that's the situation you're facing in because let's face facts, Canelo is dead set on getting this rematch with Bivol. Out of pride. And unfortunately, yeah, that's probably going to be the fight that we're going to get. This may have to go to the Middle East if they want to get the money they want to get and to have an upper card that's worth a damn. Because, yeah, it's not a really good situation. And I agree. He'll skill-wise, he'll never be Bivol. If there was any chance that Canelo had against a light heavyweight, it would have been Beterbiev. Just because of the way Beterbiev's body has been breaking down recently in his fights. That was his best shot. And when it comes in fully getting into that area when it comes to light heavyweight. But no, he did the challenge. Bivol proved to be up to the challenge. And unless something drastically happens, I don't see a different result.
If the rematch doesn't happen, the more I'm thinking about it right here, as we're talking, I tend to agree with Los Libertinos uh, on the possibility of a fight between Canelo and Charlo, and we're talking about Jamal Charlo, WBC middleweight champion. Middleweight Charlo, he's been out the ring a while, right? What, close to 2 years? He needs something, right? The fans are talking, annoyed that he's been out the ring for so long, and that he hasn't been in a big fight, because there there have been potential matchups available for him that he has not taken part in, be it Jacobs at 60, be it Andrade, um, be it Canelo at 60. Um, he could fight him at 68. If it doesn't happen, I would say Canelo, yeah, go for Charlo. Straight up right now. In Texas, whether at Jerry's place, where the Cowboys play. Yeah, that would draw a sizable crowd. Uh, Canelo's fans will show out in full force. And Charlo, who has a pretty significant fan base in his home state of Texas, would show up as well. So, yeah, if the fight with Bivol doesn't happen next, yeah, Los Libertino, I'm right there with you. I'm right there with you. Yeah, bring on Canelo and Charlo, or Canelo, if he wants to adamant about his next fight being at 75 and it's not Bivol, yeah, go with Bertobiev. Be a good fight. Bertobiev, in my opinion, he's slowing down a little bit. The fight with Yard proved that, even though Bertobiev stopped Yard. Bertobiev, powerful puncher, but I don't like the fact that he's getting hit more, and I don't like the fact that he's tender faced at this point. Continues to get cut and whatnot. So put some comments here. It says that Daniel's pushing that be at Captain Dumb and Blind when it comes to the Benavidez. Benavidez signed a 3-fight deal with Showtime and not the Zone, but calling out Canelo. Respectfully, Yemi, that doesn't matter. Technically, if the WBC activates him, makes him mandatory, the fact that he signed with PBC, I get it, but a mandatory will be a mandatory. Canelo would, by section and body rule, he would be obligated to do that. Put it this way: if they really make him mandatory, and Canelo is ordered to fight him, and he doesn't, and decides to give up, it decides to instead vacate the WBC belt, who's the fault there? Not Benavidez. That would be on Canelo. So, however you want to put it, that the fact that he re-signed with PBC, it's kind of irrelevant. It's kind of irrelevant, particularly if when he's finally made mandatory, there will still be an onus for that fight to happen, however you want to put it. And it's on Canelo to fight him. Full stop.
Oh, you forgot one thing, Mike. You forgot one thing. This is Mauricio we're dealing with. He'll put a franchise belt on Canelo.
And it still will be on Canelo. It will still be a Canelo in the WBC's fault. It will still be Canelo in the WBC's fault. There's a clamoring for the fight to happen. The fans want it. Benavidez want it. It will still fall at the feet of Alvarez, because if they will name him franchise, the WBC will name him franchise. Don't think that the two parties were not in cahoots to make that happen. If the fight's there and available, it should happen. If Canelo really wants it, say it. Period.
I think we're right. We were right earlier. We're getting Canelo versus Berlanga.
Oh God. Oh God.
Boxing.
We can beat this. We can beat this into the ground. Let's move on to other matters, because Canelo and Berlanga. No, I refuse. Let's move on. Going to you, Daniel. Julio Cesar Martinez, WBC flyweight champion, made his return to the ring, fought on the undercard of Canelo and Ryder. Fought Ronal, Batista, stopped him in 11. I've been very critical of Martinez in the past year. Plus, as I said on last week, when he fought Charlie Edwards, was disqualified there and subsequently won the WBC belt in his first couple of title defenses. He looked like he was going to be a real force in the lower weight divisions, but in the past in the past few fights, he hasn't looked good. To me, physically, he doesn't seem to be the same following the beating that he suffered against Chocolatito Gonzalez. He's had fights postponed on multiple occasions due to injury or illness. Finally got in the ring. He won by stoppage here. Looked better than he has in recent outings, in my opinion. Just the power of El Rey just proved to be too much for Batista, as he basically pounded him until the referee decided to step in and stop the fight.
Pretty much. Look, it was a tale of two halves.
I don't know where to judge El Rey in the aftermath of this fight. You know, you got Sonny Edwards, you got Bam Rodriguez, who's going to be on the shelf for a while due to a fractured jaw in his last fight, right? It would seem that Edwards and Martinez would be the reasonable fight, the sensible fight at 112 pounds with Bam out, but they've attempted to make that fight multiple times, has fallen through. Where do you see Julio Cesar Martinez best off of this win?
That's the part that's interesting to me, because this was a tale to me of two halves of the fight. It looked like in the first half of the fight that he still had a mental block from the beating that he took against Chocolatito, because he wasn't throwing combinations in as crisp as he normally would. He was more tentative, and I think between the 6th and 7th rounds, or the 5th or 6th rounds, there are periods of the fight where he was just staying there on the ropes and letting Batista go off on his shots. But once he scored,
I think Daniel's audio may have went out. Can you hear me?
No.
Is he still there? I'm thinking we're having difficulties. There you go.
So you have
it's just mainly I'm on the phone, so I had to keep the screen on. Otherwise, it cuts off. But no, if I was saying, like in the 7th round, Martinez knocked down Batista. Initially, was called a slip. They showed on the zone. They showed the replay where it didn't look like a slip at all. It looked like it landed clean. And the referee said, upon further review, it was a knockdown. There was no official replay in this fight. This was because Mauricio said, "Hey, yeah, this was a knockdown. We saw it on TV." Like that was one of the weirdest things I've seen in a while when it comes to the sport. But after that, Martinez gained his confidence, and he was able to land his shots, and they were able to control the pace against Batista, and ultimately broke him down, got what he needed to do in the 11th. I don't know right now what his future is going to be. I still think he still probably has a mental block because of the Chocolatito fight. That is something that he has to work with, and probably it may involve a sports psychologist to break it down, because otherwise, if you put him against Sonny Edwards, I'm going to say Sonny Edwards is the favorite at this point. If the Martinez that showed up in the first half of the fight, someone that shows up, he doesn't have much of a shot. He has to he has to see what actually works, so he can go back to the style that made him a pretty much the style that got him the shot against Chocolatito. I think he'll get there, but hopefully, like I said, he has to talk to somebody to do it.
Nice win here, Gail, but the fact remains, I'm still somewhat skeptical of El Rey. I agree with Daniel. If he was to fight Edward right now, I'd make him the underdog. If he was to fight Bam, once Bam returned, I would make him the underdog. To me, Daniel said he needs to maybe see a psychiatrist. To me, it's just an issue of physical deterioration. Um, the injuries, the illness. I think he has issues making 112 pounds, and I can't put enough emphasis on the physical toll that fight against his loss to Chocolatito took was on Martinez. You suffer that kind of beating, sustained beating, and it was from opening bell really to end. It's just kind of hard to recover from. You just don't you just don't exactly have the same amount of pepper afterwards.
Absolutely right. Everyone needs to remember the context of that fight. First of all, Martinez took the fight on short notice and went up a weight division to do it. And then you're right. He took an absolute beating. I was ringside for that fight. And Gonzalez was relentless through that fight. It was ugly. And it does take you a while to recover from something like that. Martinez had never been in a fight of that nature. Those fights are far more damaging than a one punch, one hitter quitter knockout. Because once that happens, it's over. You done. You get up. You know, how many times have we seen someone knocked out cold and 5 minutes later they're up, they're fine, they're talking about the fight. Yeah, he caught me. When you go through a fight like Martinez did with Gonzalez, that is like being tied to the bumper of a truck and dragged down a dirt road for 12 rounds. And you're banging away behind that truck the whole time. It is brutal. I'm not ready to write him off at all. I think there's still plenty of talent left. He has had injuries, but he's on the road back. He's still very talented. I like the way that he finally got into the groove, stepped on the gas, and finished off that fight. That's a good sign. And come on, let's face it, the reason that Eddie Hearn is signing all of these smaller weight fighters is to set up some cards, to set up some main events. I do think when Martinez is ready and recovered, depending on how quickly he wants to get back in the ring, we absolutely will see in the UK a fight between Sonny Edwards and Julio Cesar Martinez. And let us all remember how well some of these, he's not the mystery. He's not in the mystery Mexican category, but he is in the, Mexican fighting in the UK category. And, you can tell my dog Dolly's very excited about it. They have done extremely well. And that's a big money-making fight. That is a big ticket fight in the UK to have Sonny Edwards headlining with Martinez. Mark the calendar. It's going to happen.
And with Edwards recently signing with Matchroom following the upheaval over at Probellum, and we'll talk about another Probellum fighter who recently signed with Matchroom in the news segment. It's the likelihood of that flyweight unification bout happening seems to be better than it was, let's just say, a year and a half ago. At the very least, in terms of El Rey, maybe this win and how he looked, particularly towards in the final few rounds of this fight, it'll give him a boost of confidence, and it will serve him well in future outings. I go back to you, Gail. Oleksandr Gvozdyk. The last time many fans remember him was back, what was it, 2018? I think it was November 2018. in a stoppage loss to Artur Beterbiev. He's been out the ring for what, 3 years, over 3 years now. Well, he made his return on this undercard, on the undercard of Alvarez. Ryder fought Richard Bolotniks, and I got to say, Gil, for a fighter who's 36 years old, off such a long time out of the ring, he looked really, really good. I was surprised at how well he fought. And if this is the version of Gvozdyk we're going to see from now on, dare I say he's a player at 175?
Yeah, he absolutely can be. He has the potential to be. Uh, he took a pretty heavy duty beating at the hands of prime Artur Beterbiev and decided to retire. At that point, he was 33 years old, 17-1, 14 knockouts. And he, at the time, said, I have other pursuits. I want to see about some business possibilities. Apparently, he also went back and pursued some higher education, and good for him. And we also have to remind ourselves the war between Russia and Ukraine intervened. And like many Ukrainians, he went to serve as part of the forces. And it might have been that recognition of going to war and thinking about the course of your life and the potential of having that life cut short by war that got him thinking, I quit too soon. I've still got the skills if I put my mind to it. Looked at the landscape, looked at a aging Beterbiev. He's never fought Bivol. Gvozdyk, although he did have a fairly decent knockout percentage, was always perceived as much more of a boxer than a puncher, in that Ukrainian style. And decided, what, he would regret not giving it one more try. So he actually fought a 6-round fight a few months ago in February on an undercard in a club fight in Pomona, California that nobody knew about. And just to shake the rust off, he is training again in Oxnard at the Lomachenko Egis Klimas complex. In his last fight, he was trained by Teddy Atlas. He always sort of unofficially looked to Anatoly Lomachenko, Vasily Lomachenko's father and trainer, for some advice. Now Papa Lomachenko is officially his head trainer, and which makes a lot of sense. He went back to his familiar gym. He did look like he was still a bit rusty at the start of this fight, but he kind of stepped on the gas quickly in the third, fourth, fifth round and managed to score a pretty good knockout. It was a great performance once he got revved up. That tells me that there is still potential, and he can absolutely be a player in what is a real competitive division with Bivol at the top, mind you, but those belts are potentially in play depending on what Beterbiev does and what happens in a fight that could be a unification fight. Maybe one of them retires, maybe not, but I like somebody thinking to themselves, listen, I do not want to be at the end of my life and have regrets that I didn't give it one last try. And I think that's where he is, and I'm all for it. Let's see how far he goes.
Absolutely. Let's see. If you're listening to us on YouTube and I see the YouTube chat is popping, please hit that like button. Please hit that subscribe button. To do so will help the overall algorithms get us that much closer to being monetized. A lot of comments here in the chat. A lot of comments there in the chat. It would be nice if the comments were coupled with hitting that like button. So please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button if you have not done so. Let's move on to some news here. And how do I want to go? I mentioned in the discussion about in our recap of El Rey and his win over Batista, Sonny Edwards' name was mentioned, IBF flyweight champion. I talked about how he had um, went over from Probellum to Matchroom. I teased that there was another fighter who had moved on from Probellum to Matchroom. That other fighter is one Regis Prograis, current WBC champion at 140 pounds. It was announced on the same card as Alvarez and Ryder uh, uh, um, that Ruguru Prograis, uh, who was a free agent, signed a deal with Matchroom. He's going to make his debut with Matchroom June 17th against Liam Paro, undefeated fighter at 140 pounds. That fight is going to happen in Progress' hometown of New Orleans. Regis admitted Daniel that there were other offers on the table, might have even been more lucrative offers, specifically with Top Rank. But he said that Matchroom felt like it was home for him. There's possibilities for Progress at 140 pounds, right? You got I mentioned Paro. There's the possible winner of Taylor and Teofimo. You got the IBF champion Matias, who I believe has also recently, or I think either has or in discussions with Matchroom as well. Your reaction to Regis Prograis bypassing an offer from Top Rank and deciding to join the Matchroom stable?
Now, when this was mentioned last week, to me it was perplexing. It's a bit more perplexing now that you hear a couple of details, unless Prograis really felt that Top Rank, even though they were going to give him more money, we're not going to give him the fights that he actually wants. Because we have seen instances of fighters getting signed by promoters strictly to keep them on the shelf. And he may have felt that would have been the case in this situation because Top Rank does have certain plans at 140, 135, 137, involving a lot of top fighters. They have certain plans in mind. The situation, though, is probably when it came to Ruger saying is how can we emphasize a fight and probably make it a little bit more manageable on our end, which means, like I mentioned in the comments, Jake Catterall, that's actually a really, really good fight, especially with the way, let's face it, the way Josh Taylor flat out ducked Catterall in the rematch.
I
we can
agree.
all admit that.
That's a heck of a matchup if it ever happens.
Yeah, and I mentioned that's probably what it was going to happen when we heard the confirmation that it was going to be Teofimo versus Taylor. I said, you know what? That's probably going to wind up being the rematch, Ruguru versus Catterall, and that's a good possibility now with this fight. We have to see how 140 shapes up, really, in this sense, because one, sooner or later, within the next 2 years, Shakur is going to go up to 140. We know this.
And Haney.
And Haney. Next to those two are coming. Ryan's there, even though, he lost a tank, he probably came out better a little bit coming into that. So Ryan's there. Oh, yeah. And because he's already fought near that weight class, even though he's probably the smallest one out of all of them, Tank will probably be there 140. So he's jumping in right as a division, maybe getting really, really hot. So it's going to be an interesting play because I completely understand the sentiment if he feels that Top Rank, even though they were offering more money, were not actually going to be in his best interest. They were not going to put him into fights that he felt that he should have gotten. And unfortunately, this has been one of the issues with Ruguru's career. He's always been one of those fighters that he's been ducked more often than he's been sought out. So hopefully this does produce good results for him. Because otherwise, like I said, it'll be even more perplexing than what it was last week to me.
Smart move or dumb move on the part of Prograis, yeah.
Well, it depends on what his objectives are. If his objectives are to maximize his earning potential the rest of his career, he made the smart move. If you think he should be more ambitious in the choice of his potential opponents, uh, without regard to his income, maybe not the best move. But come on, folks. We all work for a living. And when we work, we want to be paid the maximum possible for our skills, don't we? Of course we do. Professional athletes are the same. So I get it. It's a little bit of a head scratcher for some people thinking, well, who's over there in the Matchroom stable for Prograis to fight? Well, there are enough people to keep him busy. And we also have to remember, it's funny, because of some of his long absences between fights, I think people perceive that Prograis is perhaps younger than he is. He's 34 years old. How much longer does he intend to fight? A lot of us assume, and it would be the right thing to assume, that once somebody starts getting into the back half of their 30s, they've got not that many years to fight, and certainly far fewer years ahead of them than behind them. So if he wants to maximize his paydays with a few last big fights, he's in the right place.
In the short term, Daniel, you mentioned how there's a lot of activity at 135, 140 over on the top rank side, but on Matchroom PBC side, if you want to call it, a fight I would love to see in the next 6 to 12 months is a fight between Prograis and IBF champion Subriel Matias. Matias, he won the vacant IBF title earlier this year by stoppage. In shortly after winning the title, he called for a fight against Prograis. Excuse the vulgarity here, but not vulgarity, but the excuse the rhetoric. But he says he'll put Prograis, paraphrasing, in the hospital. Prograis said we'll see. Is in effect said we'll see. He'll knock Matias out. Whatever. A lot of trash talk between these two. On paper, that would be a good fight, right? The skills, both guys can punch. Um, Prograis is a better boxer, in my opinion, better defense, but Matias, he's balls to the wall in terms of his approach. He's coming to knock you, to take your head off with each and every punch he throws, and will be an exciting fight. And I think that's a fight that can be made early 2024. I think it was Bon Wee Wee who said in the live chat, he said that Regis and Shakur would be fired. I agree. The boxing skills of Shakur versus the boxer puncher that is Prograis. Another fight I would like at 140 is a fight between Prograis and Haney as well. Let's face it, Haney, who's the undisputed champion at 135 pounds, is going to fight Lomachenko May 20th. If he wins, Haney is not long for 35. We all know his issues making weight. He's going to move up to 40 sooner rather than later, right? And there is a good relationship between Haney and Matchroom. Matchroom did Haney a solid, let him go, let him sign with Top Rank in order for Haney to pursue his goals of becoming undisputed lightweight champion, defeating Kambosos last year. I think that Haney hasn't forgotten that. And if there's an opportunity for a big fight with Prograis at 140 pounds, I think the two could work out a fight against one another. So yeah, I personally like the move for Prograis. He's been searching for this kind of opportunity for his entire career. Hopefully, it'll lead to big fights, and we will see who he gets in the ring with moving forward. I'm gonna save this I'm gonna go to Joe Joyce. Whoever wants to talk about this, we can. Whoever wants to touch this topic, we can. We all remember just what, not that long ago, a few episodes back, Joe Joyce got in the ring with Zhilei Zhang. Joe Joyce, a mandatory contender by one of the sanctioning bodies. It was anticipated that Joyce would beat Zhang, but nope. As Zhang just went right a tat 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 on Joyce's head, and particularly his eye, stopped him in 6 rounds. Joyce has now decided to exercise the rematch clause. I can anything change? Can anything change against in a rematch here? Because let's face it, Joyce is like Hammerhead. He just comes in there just one way, just eats up punches. And if he can't avoid the jab, and more importantly, the straight left hand of Zhilei Zhang, I see a rematch pretty much going the same, ended up in the same way. What say you, Gail and Daniel?
If it hadn't been for the fact that Joyce's face was so badly bruised up and his eye damaged, truly we all assumed that Joyce's orbital bone had been broken. Turned out it wasn't broken. He just had a hell of a bruising from Zhang. Knowing that, he certainly could have continued in the fight. I think in this case, I don't hate a rematch. I really don't. Assuming that Joyce can avoid injury, he has every possibility of going, getting to the final bell, turning it around. I see this as having a lot more potential for a comeback, for a little bit of a revenge, than I do in the fight we were talking about earlier, Canelo Bivol 2. I think it's a good one. If you look around the heavyweight division at the possible matchups and what we're hearing about possible matchups this year, a lot of Joyce's potential dance partners are taken. If we are going to get a double header in the Middle East of Fury Usyk and Joshua Wilder, who else is left for Joyce, really? I know Hrgovic has been mentioned, but, if I'm Joyce, I think there's some pride involved as well. And maybe he, it's possible he firmly believes, mentally believes that if it hadn't been for the injury, he could have, stuck it out and prevailed, turned the fight around. I don't hate this one. And I get it, because his choices are limited for the top talents. And I'd like to see it.
This is an interesting story because, Gail, you mentioned it, that the big rumor that December fight in the Middle East, which I still think will never happen, because to me, Tyson Fury will never fight Oleksandr Usyk. But there is still talk of Fury fighting early in the summer. One of the opponents in that pool was Zhilei Zhang. So this takes Zhilei Zhang at a really decent payday to rematch when it comes to Joyce. And first, I said it when we had the fight that I thought his orbital bone was broken. I fully admit, because that looked like a standard orbital bone break, but the fact that it was just a bruise is insane in many ways. But one thing that he probably has to learn, Joyce, if he's gonna have a chance of winning the rematch, is he cannot eat those left hands from Zhang. He cannot eat those all fight long. He has to fix his defense to the point where he cannot land straight. And he has to hit Zhang's body a lot earlier in order to wear him down. There is a little bit more intrigue in this rematch. And we have to remember, Joyce now has felt the situation of what he did to Daniel Dubois. Because Dubois was also the fighter that was on the rise, and then Joyce flat out took him out in 8 rounds. It took a while, but now Dan Dubois is lined up to face Usyk for the mandatory. there is a chance to rebuild from this. So it is. I understand it. If he can actually fix his defense to make sure the Zhang's left doesn't land at will, then he probably has a fairly good shot because even though Zhang was landing those left and right, there were instances where you could felt that Joyce's power was getting to Zhang. So there is good intrigue when it comes to this rematch to me.
Let me read out some live comments here in the live chat from Larry Liston. He says that Joyce has absolutely no defense whatsoever. He has always been totally open against southpaws. Can't fight southpaws since he doesn't possess head movement and can't use his jaw for defense. He also says that if Joyce fights Zhang, the exact same thing will happen. Another UK heavyweight pipe job who got badly exposed, just like Dubois. Watch his fight against Hammer. He's totally open for the left hand. And what he also says, one more comment here: when you get hit that hard, that many times in the head, it shakes your core and takes your balance, which is what you saw in the end of that fight. Joyce would have gotten spark out. He last comment here. He says it takes coordination and more importantly, your legs. To your point, to Larry Liston's comments, there was a lot of, and we talked about this in the days after that fight. There were a lot of folks who were who felt that Joyce came in too light, right? He was maybe 15, 20 pounds lighter than what he's accustomed to fighting. He looked good physically, ripped and in shape, but a lot of people felt that took something out of him to get down, to lose that many pounds from his previous outings. Do you think that affected his coordination and took something from his legs, as Larry Liston suggested here in the chat? And do you think he should put that weight back on in a rematch against Zhang?
I don't have strong feelings on whether he needs to do that one way or the other. He certainly should study video of the fight and figure out what it's going to take for him to avoid those left hands. And to me, that takes mobility, right? I don't think you're going to teach a guy like Joyce upper body mobility, in one camp. He's just not that kind of fighter. He is just a big, pillar of a dude. If that's the case, and he thinks more weight will help him withstand taking those punches, I hate the thought that a fighter's strategy is, well, I'm going to eat those punches, so I need to toughen myself up or put on some more weight to be able to do that. But, Joyce has never been a particularly mobile fighter. So, maybe that is the ticket for him.
There is an argument to be made. Yeah, there is an argument to be made that, if you get a little bit heavier, you're able to withstand punches better. But that would have been a good strategy before the fight happened. Because now you're going to be facing a Zhilei Zhang that is very confident that he can beat you, who knows the one punch that could probably take you out now. And if you come in heavier, and unfortunately, because the commenter was right, unfortunately, Joyce has never been that agile of a fighter. He's been just more like a cinder block that just walks right through you. He just wears you down over time. We have to also remember that Zhilei Zhang is pretty mobile for his size too. Is not as much of an anomaly as Tyson Fury is for the height in boxing, but he's still more mobile. And if the strategy is, okay, I'm going to eat more punches, you're going to wind up with the same result. If anything, this time he will break your orbital ball. So the strategy has to change a little bit, but we even take into account Joyce's lack of ability. But it has to change. It can't just be simply, I'm going to eat these punches and just hope I land mine. We've seen plenty of fighters do that over and over again, and every single time the result has not been good.
We will see when the fact that Joyce is exactly the rematch basically means that they're going to fight each other next, probably summer, early fall. We will see what adjustment Joyce can make in a rematch against Zhilei Zhang because he's going to need to do something. Um, because their first fight, what he did then, it wasn't it. It wasn't it. And has to find a way to avoid the jab, has to find a way to implore to improve his defense, and have to find a way to avoid that quick left hand from the big southpaw from China. Can he turn things around? We will see when they get back into the ring. A lot of discussion, Gail and Daniel. I want both of you into this. We're going to do a deep dive into this next topic. Um, the mythical title, really, that's what it is. The mythical title of the face of boxing, right? That's been a hot discussion on boxing message boards and throughout social media, particularly since Gervonta Tank Davis anointed himself as the new face of boxing following his win over Ryan Garcia, right? When Canelo was asked about this in the lead up to the fight against Ryder, he said, wait a minute, Tank. You need more than one fight to do that, to call yourself the new face of boxing, and basically said that he still is that he still holds the mantle, right? Well, Claressa Shields came out with a video um, and wrote an article about this for Three Kings Boxing. Please check out threekingsboxing.com, your source for pure unadulterated boxing information. Check out the entire 3KB crew. 2K, who's the man behind Three Kings. Um, Fellow senior writers, Bo, who you've heard on the show numerous times, Bakari, yours truly, Brett, who does a lot of the editing and work on the site, along with 2K, and as well as all the contributors behind the scenes. Shields came out with a video on her social media, and she made an argument that this term face of boxing is basically being viewed through a male-centered gaze. And she used her example, her accomplishments, her many accomplishments in the ring, and said that if she was a man, just paraphrasing, if that she was a man, there would be no doubt that given what she's done since she's turned pro in 2016, if she was a male fighter, she would be the face of boxing. Just going to throw it out here on the table to you, Daniel and Gail and Daniel. Is Shields right? Would she be the face of boxing if she was a man? Or is there certain context here or certain conditions here, distinctions, differences between men and women's boxing that Shields may be overlooking?
Of course, there is. So let's start out first of all. The face of boxing, the face of boxing, of all of boxing. Let's remember that a lot of the boxing universe exists outside the United States. And I could argue that boxing is far healthier in Great Britain, in Japan, in Mexico, for sure, for a starter, than it is here in the United States. So to call Gervonta Davis the singular face of boxing is very provincial. If you want to say he's the face of boxing in the United States, you could certainly engage in a more interesting discussion. But the truth is, even in the United States, the fan base is dominated by the Latino community. And I say that sitting here in Southern California.
It has been for at least the last 10
Has been
years.
for a long time. Demographically, it's just a fact that
And really 20 years if you want to go back to the days of De La Hoya. Excuse me for interrupting.
Absolutely. Yeah. The growing population alone, the growing percentage of the population, helps fuel it. It's not right or wrong. It's just simply a demographic fact. So you have to acknowledge that worldwide, the single person that is the biggest draw is still Canelo Alvarez. It is still Canelo Alvarez. Now, if you want to make a case that Gervonta is advancing toward being the face of boxing in the United States, I think he might be one day. He is potentially heading there. Is he right now? I think that is a bit short-sighted, not including the millions of people who follow boxing around the world. If you ask people in Japan, they're all going to say Naoya Inoue is the face of boxing. If you ask people in Great Britain, they're likely to say that Tyson Fury or even Anthony Joshua, who from an economic and fan standpoint is probably still a bigger draw. So what does it mean to be the face of boxing? The person that puts the most butts in the seats? Well, brace yourselves, hold on, tie yourself down right now. Michael, you in particular, just fair warning, trigger alert. If your criteria is the person who puts the most butts in the seats, Jake Paul is the face of boxing.
Oh, Lord.
So be careful how you define it. Be very careful. I think the idea that there is a singular face of boxing is just a silly thing to even be discussing. There are fan bases, there are tribes all over the world. And I say that in the purest sense of, we all support our own. We do. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's what makes it interesting to see a fight like between Tank and Ryan, who absolutely bring two very passionate fan bases to bear. So, no, Gervonta Davis is not the face of boxing. Claressa, I love you. Even if you were a man, I'm not even sure you'd be the American face of boxing, although you would certainly be entitled to make an argument. But worldwide, if you're going to pinpoint any particular woman as the face of boxing, I'm sorry to say it's still going to be Katie Taylor, until and unless Amanda Serrano beats her in a rematch. But if you look at accomplishments, that's a different story. That's why there are these mythical pound for pound rankings. But we all have to acknowledge, every single one of us that looks at this, there's no objective criteria. It's subjective. It is all through the prism of who we are, what we like, what we grew up watching, what we prefer. And there's something for everyone in boxing. That's what's so marvelous about it. And a lot of us have watched fights from countries where, we don't know anyone personally from those backgrounds. We don't know a lot about that particular culture, but we can all still enjoy the competition. And I prefer that we all focus on that.
This is a discussion that it's very, very hard to unpack, because one thing that Gail's right about is the fact that having Americans solely be focused being the face of boxing is pretty provincial, considering the state of the sport that it is and how strong it is here in the US compared to international, to Europe, to Asia, and also dependent upon the weight class. So when I heard Claressa's comments, I wanted to look at this specific circumstance. If she were a male fighter who was that young, had her backstory, especially with the situation still involving Flint, Michigan, and the water supply, and the entire political landscape in Michigan at the time, and also taking into account that the last person that won a gold medal, that if I remember correctly, for the U.S. in the Olympics in boxing was Andre Ward. And he wasn't that heralded coming into that class. We have to remember that Claressa and Marlon Esparza were the faces of that Olympics when it came to U.S. boxing in both London and Rio. So if you equate that, and if Claressa would have been the man, having those circumstances and have everything else fall into line where the U.S. Olympic Committee in boxing was behind you, they were putting you front and center, and you won the gold medal, not only win it once but twice, I could see her argument right there that she could be a face of boxing. But the problem, unfortunately, is that it's very, very fragmented. Like, we have to remember the main reason why pound for pound lists exist. It was mainly to highlight fighters, particularly Sugar Ray Robinson, who were not heavyweights in the U.S. because that's the other major hurdle when it comes into it. If you're going to look at it from one standpoint, heavyweights are the ones that move the needle here in the U.S. more often than not, and unfortunately, that doesn't leave a lot of room. And let's not also forget that coming around that time that she did, Floyd was still around. And Floyd has, in many ways, still not wanted to let go to be that face of boxing. There's a reason he's still doing these exhibitions, even though each one of them creates less of a reward financially. But I could see where her argument is coming from, but boxing at this point is too fragmented in certain spaces where you can clearly see in the face on it. Because you mentioned Anthony Joshua. Anthony Joshua has, if I'm correct, he was big in that campaigns in Asia for a good while because he has that look of a heavyweight champion. And in the US, yeah, like it or not, Canelo's still probably the face on it. Tank could be considered an heir to Floyd's space as the face of boxing, but Shakur could easily take that in a couple of years. Haney could take that in a couple of years. Boots Ennis could take that in a couple of years. Virgil Ortiz could take that in a couple of years. So there's a lot of factors you got to play into it, but we're talking about a sport that has become a niche in this country. You can be the face of a niche, but it's probably not going to be face overall unless you're looking into just money. That's probably the only way to see it, unfortunately, at this stage.
The conversation is, let's face it, it's not necessarily objective. It is subjective, right? There's a dynamic here when it comes to men's and women's boxing that you just have to put into consideration. I hear what Shields is saying. If you want to just base it off her, if she was a man and she had accomplished the things that she's done, would she be face of boxing? I can hear that argument. The other side of that, if she was a male boxer, she would not have been able to attain the number of world titles that she's had. And for sure, she wouldn't have been no 3-time undisputed champion because, let's face it, when it comes to the dudes, it's harder for the difficulty to get big fights, the difficulty to get unification bouts, much less undisputed, is greater than when it comes to women. And to Gail's earlier point, we're talking, if you're going to say quote unquote face of boxing, you just can't be it has to be in the scope of global. And I think when folks anoint themselves that, be it Tank or even Claressa, right? They're not thinking about the global perspective and how popular the sport is and how healthy the sport is around the world. Gail, you're absolutely right. When it comes to if boxing was a drum beat, right? Uh the sport has a healthier heart in places like England, right? In places like Mexico. Um than it is here in the United States. I will argue if even if you want to stick to American specific, the beat of boxing is stronger and the pulse is stronger in the Southwest versus the Northeast or the Midwest. Is that Latino market that's popping? And if Shields were a man, would she gain that? Would she get access into that Latino market? That's debatable. The reason that Floyd became so popular because let's face it, he began fighting on in May and Cinco de Mayo weekend and on weekend of Mexican Independence Day, right? Uh, focusing, moving his base of operations to Las Vegas, becoming a, a popular figure in Las Vegas, infusing himself in that Vegas market. Uh, Canelo has that now. It remains a question whether the Shields could get that if she wants to call herself the face of boxing, even with those accomplishments. If you don't do that, you can't be the face of boxing in America, much less the world.
Yeah, I don't like this discussion in general.
It's
I
too
don't
truncated.
it absolutely. And why aren't we celebrating the contributions of an incredible diverse array of people from around the world? Um, there is no sport, in my opinion, more diverse than boxing, where people do not have to get into major league sports because they got into a college to play football, or it is just so much more open and egalitarian. It is difficult. Let us make no mistake. Boxing isn't something that anyone from an affluent background, with few exceptions, decides to pursue. It is just simply too difficult. But as many people have said, boxing has saved more people, has provided more opportunity than, unfortunately, those who do get harmed, and they do. We had I believe, a Filipino-born fighter who died after a fight earlier this week. But it's a mere fraction of the people who pursue boxing, who become successful, who earn money, who earn a living. The people who earn a very good living are limited. They're at the very top of this food chain. But that is true of all professional sports. There are plenty of people who pursue sport and it deters them from getting involved in criminal activity or committing crimes just to simply survive. It gives them a sense of discipline. It keeps them healthier because they're moving. So I would argue that this relentless idea that there is a single face of boxing, I just don't think it is a healthy thing for us as human beings.
Let's not also forget.
Final word, Daniel, before we move on and preview some fights.
No, let's not also forget, unfortunately, it is in our nature when it comes to sports to always want to have somebody be the face, whether it's individual sports or whether it's team sports. Like, just look at the ongoing, unfortunately, debate over who's the GOAT, Michael or LeBron. You're gonna have that debate into it, but boxing is a sport where you cannot have that argument and not have it be muddied by some way or another. So that's unfortunately the face of it. I understand what Clarissa's saying, but there's a lot of obstacles that were standing in her way too.
Yeah, and I just felt given the comments today, um, it would be that we touch on it. This is not a slight against Claressa Shields. We're not dissing her in any manner. She's highly accomplished. Um, she calls herself the GWOAT for a reason, and truth be told, she does. Her accomplishments should warrant more respect and credibility um, in the larger realm of the sport, right? And she's finally making some money now, particularly over the last year. She's gained more visibility and is making and is making more money. But in light of her comments, I think that a healthy discussion was needed. Nothing against what she said, but there's some context there that was omitted from her comments, and has really been omitted. That's not been included in the discussion since Tank anointed himself as that mantle following the win over Ryan Garcia, and why not have that conversation and try to put some context into in the entire discussion about um, the mythical title of the face of boxing here on the Pound for Pound Boxing report. Let's move on to some preview some fights here, and because we went so heavy into the discussion about Ryder and Canelo and Ryder in terms of this discussion here about Claressa Shields, I'm going to split these fights up. Um, and I'll go to you, Gail. On ESPN, you're going to have a double header, a world title double header. Um, Headlining, of course, is the return of Janibek Alimkhanuly, WBO middleweight champion, fighting Stephen Butler. Some fans may remember Butler um, for his fight against Royota Murata. I want to say that was back in 2018, either 2018 or 2019. He was stopped in uh, the fifth round. Alimkhanuly, coming off of the win against Stephen Butler, his first defense of the WBO belt, didn't look good, right? Well, it was pretty mid. Let me put it that way. Many felt that Alimkhanuly would just um, slice through um, Denzel Bentley like a hot knife through butter, but Bentley made him go the distance. Alimkhanuly said he's made some changes in his camp, and he's promising he's going to deliver the knockout of the year here against Butler, who can punch. But if you remember the fight against Murata, he got hurt and ultimately dropped. And if Murata can inflict damage on Butler, um, it wouldn't be a stretch to say that that Kanuli, Kazakhstan, has that same potential.
Yeah, he absolutely does. I mean, Butler is a credible opponent after losing to Murata, which was a fifth round TKO. He actually then suffered another loss in a comeback fight, another fifth round TKO, which was a fight in Mexico. But since then, he's fought in his native Montreal, has had very good outings. He's dominated either on the scorecards or scored knockout wins of his own. So he's kind of, crawled his way back to this opportunity. As for Alimkhanuly, he is really an enigma to me. He is from Kazakhstan. He sees himself as sort of the heir apparent to Gennady Golovkin. 13-0, 8 knockouts, managed by Egis Klimas, who seems to spot a lot of Eastern European talent. He's not a youngster. He's 30 years old with those 13 fights, like a lot of Eastern European fighters. He has a very deep amateur background. And when he first arrived into the professional ranks, man, he came on like a house on fire. Looked great. Looked like he truly was the heir to the power punching middleweight Golovkin, the prime Golovkin. And while he hasn't lost, he's had a couple of outings that kind of, made us pump the brakes. So he needs a good, flashy outing. He really does. It's in defense of the WBO World Middleweight title. But if he really wants to put a stamp on this division and take the reins, it is there for him, because now that Canelo has moved up to super middleweight, you look around the division, and Andrade has moved up as well. Charlo hasn't formally moved up, but what I think of as Big Charlo, he's moved up. So who's left? We're still, in many instances, considering Golovkin at the top of the division. And it's more of a commentary on the lack of elite talent right now in what used to be one of the glamour divisions of boxing. It is there for the taking if Alimkhanuly can muster up what it takes to do it. We're going to see if he does. I think this fight card, which is taking place in Stockton, California, which isn't exactly, considered a hotbed of boxing. It's a very odd location to me, but it's not going to be the attention-getting card of the weekend. The Showtime card is drawing a lot more attention. Say what you will. The KSI celebrity card is going to get some attention. There are some international fights that are going to draw off attention earlier in the day. But Alimkhanuly needs to make a statement. He can't just win. He's got to blow Stephen Butler out if he can do it. That'll then put him, again, top of the conversation. And that is the only thing that's going to get him some more competitive fights. He's still very unknown among boxing fans, even the hardcore. Casual fans, no habla. They have no idea. And there's too much risk versus reward for the money available when you've got somebody like this. But Bivol was like this for a long time. Golovkin was even like this for some time. So it can be overcome. And when Top Rank has a fighter they believe is worth pushing, they will lean on it hard. But I guarantee Brad Goodman and Carl Moretti and the camp over there at Top Rank, that's the audience that's the most important for Alimkhanuly to impress, to get some more decent matchups and paydays. So see what he's got.
Record scratch. I know we're talking about the previewing some fights here, but I want to go back into the news here. I omitted one news development, and quick word on this, Gail and Daniel. I mentioned that Matchroom has signed Prograis. Another significant signing on their part is Andy Cruz, right? Olympic gold medalist, beat Keyshawn Davis to win lightweight Olympic gold. Cruz won outstanding boxer of the Tokyo Olympics, right? Consider this a big score as far as I'm concerned for Matchroom. Significant signing here from them. Your reaction, Gail and Daniel, to them signing Cruz, who early you thought he may sign with Top Rank, but no. Give credit here for Matchroom for this signing.
Yeah, this was a big one. And on top of that, Eddie wants to make his pro debut against Keyshawn Davis. That could be a tantalizing fight, especially when you push the amateur record, because they fought 4 times. And Cruz has beat Davis every single time. But that's the amateurs. We've seen Keyshawn Davis grow exponentially as a pro fighter in his journey so far. So that to me would be interesting. But it is a good get for Eddie Hearn. It said, and if there's a fight that can be made that's going to be very interesting, I guess between 2 people that are still in the prospect stage, even one that's technically a debutante in the pros, that would be it.
Quick reaction to Andy Cruz signing with Matchroom, Gil.
There's been some stops and starts to him getting to the professional ranks because he had to get himself out of Cuba, which was no small effort. His first attempt to leave was unsuccessful. So he's finally made it. He's finally going to get his shot. I'm always very glad to see these talented Cuban school fighters get here and see how they fare in the professional ranks. Now, some of them do very, very well. Others, it's just a big adjustment and it doesn't suit them. I think Cruz, though, is going to be one who will do very well. But boy, to throw him in with the businessman in his first fight, that is sort of a death wish, isn't it, for Top Rank? I think that's a crazy thing to do. I just can't imagine they're going to do it. I really don't.
But we're talking about a uniquely talented fighter in Cruz, who fought and defeated Davis multiple times in the amateur ranks. And I'm not saying they should put him in there now immediately with Keyshawn Davis, but you give them a couple of fights if they were to fight from a year from now, and if Cruz develops in the pros the same way that he did in the amateurs, if he was to fight Keyshawn Davis in a rematch in the professional ranks, I'd favor Cruz to beat him again.
Very, very, very possible. I mean, and certainly there's some intrigue with the backstory. So I mean, I do see it, but for Pete's sake, give the guy some, exposure to the American audience against, less killer competition.
So yeah, I just had to go back and touch on that subject here. Back to the fight previews, Daniel, on the undercard of Canuli and Stephen Butler in Stockton, California. Jason Moloney, we remember him for his close, narrow loss to then IBF champion Rodriguez. Remember him Halloween 2020, I believe it was. Getting stopped by Inouye. He gets his third crack at a world title, fighting for the vacant IBF belt against Vincent Astrolabio. Astrolabio came onto the scene with his upset win over Rigo early part of 2022. Astrolabio has been on a roll here. Moloney says that he's going to take advantage. Third time is going to be a charm. Going to be the charm. What do you make of this upcoming fight?
It could be third time is a charm because Moloney's coming in with a chip on his shoulder. Because him and his brother would have been co-champions. They would have been what in many senses were Ben Rodriguez and Joshua Franco are. Two brothers that held belts that were within a weight division of each other. And that was the intrigue that you had. That's one of the reasons why Top Rank invested in keeping them in the U.S. during the pandemic, rather than having them go back to Australia. To me, Moloney is the goods when it comes to this weight. He knows what he needs to do. He has the style to win this fight, and I do expect him to win this fight. And hopefully that does set up some interesting fights down the future, because now that technically the pandemic's over, it means that you can make some big money fights in Australia and you can work on it, whether it's Moloney being the main event or have Tim Tszyu being the main event. There's money to be made.
Indeed. Again, those two fights are going to happen in Stockton, California, on ESPN. Also, this coming weekend on the 13th, in Las Vegas, the return of Rolando Romero. He's going to fight for a belt at 140 pounds, fighting Ismael Barroso, WBA title. I forgot the name. This is kind of a makeup bout because the regular champion, WBA champion, tested positive for a PED. Instead, we're going to have Romero and Barroso fight for the WBO belt. Last time we remember, Romero he got stopped in the 6th round by Tank. That grudge match. Fighting a Barroso, good fighter here. I think this is arguably the most intriguing fight of the weekend. Your take?
Well, Rolly Romero is one of those polarizing figures in boxing. He plays the heel very, very well. He gets it. And, credit to him. Credit to him. Yes. This is the card people will be paying attention to because he brings so much personality, love him or hate him, into the fight. And they managed to salvage the card, fortunately enough for everybody involved, with this new opponent. Now, a lot of people don't know him, but he's a very serviceable fighter, but he is quite a bit older than Romero. I believe he's 40, 41 years old. And if you happen to see any of the final press conference photos today between the two, wow. He may be very fit in the ring, but, he hasn't aged particularly well. Looks like he
Putting it politely.
Yeah, he looks like he may have forgotten the sunscreen. Yeah.
Old man.
Taking a lot of sun damage. I don't care how dark you are. Everybody needs some help, right? Over the years with the sunscreen, he looks like he's had a lot of sun exposure. We don't know how he's going to perform in the ring. There is, however, discussion about why in the world does this fight merit being a fight for a title, a vacant title, at super lightweight. I mean, what did these two do to merit this? Let us all remember that Romero is coming off a loss just a few days shy of a year ago, in which he got a thorough beatdown from Gervonta Davis in a 6th round TKO. He looked terrible. The cards, actually, the scorecards were shockingly even at the time of the stoppage. I think that was just ridiculous. That reflects more Gervonta's natural tendency to start slow. But once he got going, he just took Romero out. And, lead up to their fight had been pretty crazy controversial. So now here we are. He's coming off a loss. He's getting a full title fight. This isn't one of those bullshit, secondary titles either. This is the WBA strap. It's a head scratcher. Ismael Barroso, I just double checked his age. He's Venezuelan. He is 40. He is 40 years old. Now, he is coming off multiple wins. His last 2 losses were back-to-back against Akhmedov before the pandemic, in a pretty bad loss. Then he went the distance against Isa Chaneyev in Latvia. But he's also lost to Anthony Crolla. So those are the 3 losses on his record. It saved the fight. I get that. I have no problem with the matchup. I do question why in the world this merits being a title fight. Having said that, whoever fights Romero next, if it's one of the elite fighters in this division, is going to take that title away. So, Raleigh, enjoy it while you can.
And I think we're going to end the show on that note. I want to thank everybody for the comments in the live chat. I know it got a little bit contentious, but no harm, no foul here as far as we are concerned. So shout out to get everybody's name right quick here. Excuse me while I scroll back up. Shout out to Los Libertinos, Joshua Cabrera, Miss B, Gimme, who else? What You Need, Bon Wee Wee, Thank you for your comments and your questions. Again, if you have not done so, and you're checking us out on YouTube, make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. To do so, help the overall algorithms. And also shout out to Gus from Corruption in Boxing as well.
Yes.
Um, Make sure you hit that like button, that subscribe button. It'll get us. It'll help us in terms of the algorithms and get us closer to being monetized. Going to go around the panel here. Begin the show with ladies first. Going to end the show with ladies first. Gail from nyfights.com for those who want to talk, and now a member of the Boxing Writers Association. For those who want to talk the sweet science, for those who want to talk media in general, for those who want to check you out every now and then on TMZ Live. Let the folks know where they can find you.
Well, thank you everyone for the robust chat. Boy, there's some really terrific comments in there. Los Libertinos, Larry Liston. Los Libertinos, I love the idea of a fight weekend that is dedicated to the top women, just like we have Cinco de Mayo, like we have had Juneteenth in some past years. I would love to see that continue. Heck,
gotta find a way to get Los Libertinos on the show.
Yeah, we do. I would venture to say that we do it in March, which is International Women's Month, Women's History Month. You do it maybe the first weekend in March to have that top women's fight. That would seem like a great idea. Thank you all. Good to see some of our old friends like What You Need. Where you been? And Gus, where you been? Well, we're all right here on the Pound for Pound Boxing Report, and you can find my work at nyfights.com.
I'll go to you, Daniel, from For Boxing News and the Inscriber. For those who want to talk boxing, for those who want to talk pro wrestling, for those who want to talk the NBA, especially when it comes to your Miami Heat, who I believe have a 3-2 lead now over the New York Knicks. Game 6 is tomorrow night. For those who want to talk boxing, pro wrestling, the NBA, the Miami Heat, let the folks know where they can find you.
All right, folks, I'm still live on Twitter, so Raucus99 on Twitter, RIWKUZ99, if you catch me on there. And I do love that idea from Los Libertinos about a weekend that could be dedicated to women's boxing. But maybe it could be a weekend where women take over one of those days, either Mexican Independence Day weekend or Cinco de Mayo weekend, because if there's a fighter right now that has the potential to do it, it's Denise Estrada. She has all the intangibles and all the skills in the ring where I could definitely see her headline one of those weekends.
Indeed. Yeah. Her super bad. You can talk Bumgarner, Mayer, Marlon Esparza. If Chantel Cameron wins against Katie Taylor, you can McCaskill. She's still in the mix, and so there's a litany of fighter. And one more thing, give a nod to the career of, speaking of women's boxing, to Maiva Hamadouche, former IBF junior lightweight champion. Many people remember her for her outstanding effort against Michaela Mayer back in October 2021. She gave Mayer, from a physical standpoint, arguably the toughest fight of Mayer's career. The ladies went to war. Mayer got the decision, but disregard the scorecards if you try to look up the results of that fight on BoxRec. It was very, very close. Hamadouche gave Mayer hell that night. It's just Mayer just came on the last few rounds to eke out a decision. I thought it was a very, very close fight, but definitely closer than what the judges had it. But yeah, Hamadouche a couple of days ago announced her retirement from the ring as a result of a lingering eye injury. I believe she's a police officer in her spare time away from the ring. So just want to acknowledge the career of Maiva Hamadouche before we bid adieu to this particular episode. For those who want to talk boxing, music, fitness. You know what it is with me on Twitter, Brother JR76. If you want to talk boxing, music, fitness, and fragrance on IG and TikTok, you can check me out there on Brother JRSC. On the next episode of Pound for Pound Boxing Report, we will do a recap of Rolling Romero versus Barroso. We may talk Gary Antoine Russell and Francis Bartholomew. They fighting on the undercard of Russell Barroso. We will also do a recap of Janibek in his fight against Stephen Butler, as well as Moloney and Astrolabio. And we will do a preview of what is a loaded weekend of May 20th. In Vegas on ESPN plus ESPN pay per view. Devin Haney is going to fight Lomachenko. Oscar Valdez is going to fight on the undercard there. Intriguing bout between Juto Nakatani. He's fighting Jason Maloney's twin brother, Andrew Moloney, for the vacant WBO junior bantamweight title. That's all going to happen again on May 20th, ESPN pay-per-view in Las Vegas. On that same night, um, same day, excuse me, early in the day in Ireland, outstanding women's fight between uh, undisputed women's lightweight champion Katie Taylor. She's moving up to 140 pounds to fight undisputed junior welterweight champion Chantel Cameron. On the undercard, you have Terry Harper, WBA champion at 154 pounds. She's defending the belt against former undisputed welterweight champion Cecilia Brækhus. So we're going to preview all of those fights again. Outstanding weekend of the 20th. Um, Loaded with boxing, so we will preview all of those fights. Again, I want to thank everybody for their comments and their questions. I'm not again, I'm not mad at the banter back and forth. We don't take it personally from everyone in the live chat. You've listened to this has been episode 403 of the Pound for Pound Boxing Report. For Gail of NY Fights, for Daniel of For Boxing News and the Inscriber. I am your host, Michael. We'll see you guys next time. Everyone have a good evening. Good night.